Test 1 2 3. Make sure we're recording. Yes. Sweet. So we're gonna dive right into Revit, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it can be quite an intense program. It doesn't work like any of the other programs. So that is, of course, the keen principle about why it's so difficult, right? It's also one of these programs that, honestly, until you learn it, it feels like it's in control rather than you, right? Whereas in Rhino, you can usually kind of problem solve something. You can go through a couple of things, you can even click on something, type what, and get a lot of information. However, not the exact same thing in Revit, right? So just to kind of break it down a little bit, Revit is a BIM modeling program, right? Which basically stands for Building Information Modeling, right? Now, essentially what that's about, I've kind of alluded to already, is essentially, well, it's more like a catalog machine where every single part is accounted for already. It's known as parametric architecture, right? Where, obviously, if you just look at the word parametric, it just means really connected to or controlled by, right? So now we basically have design and buildings controlled by various elements or factors or variables or percentages, anything that we actually want to use. And, well, to be fair, it does have some amazing abilities, right? Whether it basically just cutting a model in half and deriving the section, very close to clipping plane, but as you'll see, without really all the effort that we manually do. Now, the reason I bring up Rhino first is because, well, you got to start somewhere, right? And to be fair, in my experience, once I understood Rhino, I understood actually a lot of programs, right? I could jump into Maya and figure it out. I could jump into Autodesk Inventor and kind of figure it out because I already had that foundation skill of problem solving, right? And command-based programs, which is a real nice plus because most programs use commands, right? Unfortunately, Revit does not, right? And even funnier, it's got the most ridiculous key codes, and I'll be calling them out as well. It can get very tricky. The only reason I'm actually good at it is, well, I even told you guys I took an entire 16-week course on it. I didn't even good at it then, right? Where I actually got good at it was working on it for 3 years at an architecture firm, right? Where I was learning from some of the best, some tips and tricks here and there, where we fake it till we make it, and where we actually produce real things in Revit. To be fair, we're not making a skyscraper today, and really this project isn't to be built, right? It's really an exploration of the program, right? Again, not so much focused on the design or really even the outcomes, but again, getting familiar with the user interface of this program because it is wildly different, right? Some of you guys might actually like it. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely got some pluses to it. If somebody told me to design a residential house for construction documents, I'm not going to do that in Rhino, right? However, I'd probably design it first in Rhino and then upload it to Revit, which I'm not going to get into, but to be fair, you can use these programs together, right? As I'll probably allude to a little bit. But let's just take a look at the project itself. This is actually the only document that you'll get, right? So the way that this works is essentially I'm going to help you out with your final project for 2 weeks. This is actually your final exam. Your final exam actually starts today, right? However, I'm going to be helping you with most of it, right? And of course, recording this as well and sharing you tons of resources that are great for Revit. But half of, or I should say 1/3 of your final exam will be basically how well did you teach yourself, right, this program? Because it is definitely one of those programs that you kind of have to teach yourself because, again, it's not command-based, so you kind of do have to start to memorize where some of the icons and particular, operations are found. Anyway, for this project, we will dive into the many components and user interface of the BIM modeling software Revit. The point of this project is to get familiar with the BIM modeling software and to practice the required skills needed for the practical world in an architectural field. Consider yourself the client for this project. You will first start by selecting your topography site, which I've actually already selected for you. The studio itself will be comprised of a relatively simple design. and will be noted for creativity in the project. But it is not the focus of the rubric. Each project in whole should fit within a 50 by 50 by 50 volume. That's very basic, and actually that is already very, very big. So obviously a little bit smaller than that. Your studio will require the following: a living space, 800 to 1,200 square feet, a studio space, about the same, a kitchen space, 400 to 800 square feet, 2 bedrooms, it's up to you kind of how big those want to be. A bathroom, 800 to 1,200 square feet, that is absolutely wrong. Right in 300 to 500 square feet. And again, to be fair, I'm not going to go in and look at each space and be like, oh, you know, Celeste, you made a 600 square foot bathroom. Fail, right? That's definitely not the case.
Which one was it?
The bathroom, definitely not that big. Just half it, 400 by 600.
400 by 600?
400 to 600, sorry. And a display area or meditation area is allowed. Really, the next point, each of your designs, but must have at least, sorry, I screwed up that sentence. Basically, each one should have at least 2 stories, right? 2 or more stories. And in fact, some students, they kind of go above and beyond and they'll go 4 stories. They'll kind of get a little creative with it. I don't expect that, is all I'm trying to say. And really just looking to see how well you're using the program. Did you get the interface? That sort of thing. Now for the design part, of course, today we'll start with the topography and basically go from there. I'm gonna kind of design as I go. Please do not design as you go, right? In fact, you'll see that there's process requirements. It says sketches, basically on trace paper. You could do, 12 by 12 pieces of trace paper, 3 to 5 sheets, think plan, section, perspective. Most of us do this in 20 minutes in Bohuslav's class in a design charrette, right? You'll usually come up with some sort of partie model. Now I know for Ed, maybe who hasn't even taken design 1, I bet you know some houses or even have an idea, considering that I've been kind of hinting at it for weeks, right? At the same time, it can just be a box, guys. We don't even have to show our parents this or any loved ones, especially your first building in Revit. I know I didn't show anybody my first model in Revit because it was god-awful ugly, but hopefully that's not the case for you. Really, the final drawings that I'm asking for are at 1/4 scale. I'll be asking for a site plan, which will show the first floor, the second floor, and repeating floors if you have a 3rd or 4th or 5th. Please don't have a 5th floor. We'll have 2 sections, all 4 elevations, and 1 to 2 perspectives. Now I know that sounds like a lot. You're thinking, whoa, I barely got that for this last project. But you'll see just how quickly and powerful this program is once we establish a model. Essentially, we just have to draw a line and it makes a section for you, it makes an elevation for you, and makes a perspective for you. Arguably, somewhat a lot easier than, say, rhinoceros. But let's just dive right into it. There is a small schedule at the bottom, basically to note that, yes, this is basically a 3-week project. The first 2 weeks I'll be with you, but arguably we're already missing a day with Thanksgiving, right? So it'll be up to you to start to learn the program, especially in that last week, right? Because we do not meet on Tuesday of week 16, right? However, I haven't decided if we'll meet for Thursday or just have a digital turn-in. I'll see where the class is at. Because I like ending on a good note, not just sort of like, bye, right? Like Zoom World was. I like to end it on a good note, even bring donuts and coffee and have a discussion, if you will, about what was performed and how we could do better, or even I could do better in terms of teaching some of this content. However, you'll notice that you can find first on our Google Drive the template file. Right, so if we go to the internet, we'll dive into Revit. And you'll notice that there's actually 2. I basically saved it as a 2023 and a 2024. So just in case you still wanted to use Revit 2023, or maybe 2024 is not working on your particular computer, you can, of course, download more. And let me know if you need one even lower than that, just because this is the unfortunate happenstance of Revit is that it doesn't save down. Like, so in Rhino, you can save to Rhino number 2 if you wanted to, and basically go back and forth between different different Rhino versions. However, in Revit, this is not the case. You can go up.
2025, will it open it up?
You can. So it will open up, but it won't open down. And that can be quite frustrating, especially for architecture firms that, work on projects for 5-6 years, and go through possibly 5 different Revit programs all in the same year. So it is detrimental, but just kind of want to point that out. In my case, I already have it open from last night. And essentially, a lot of this first tutorial, I'm just going to be talking about where all the buttons are, how things work, and I'm even going to start designing my little studio house. So first things first, there's a lot of buttons, and you'll notice it's a very architectural program, right? So unlike Rhinoceros, that's kind of used for any design, whether it's a ring on your hand, a watch, or even architecture, Revit is definitely made for only architecture. Arguably some furniture and things like that. Yes, you can do mass modeling and whatnot, but it's really geared towards architecture, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, structural engineering, and really all the other building components. Realistically, in a firm-like environment, I would be working on the same Revit file that somebody in Hong Kong, maybe they're the MEP engineer, they could work on it literally at the same time. And as I'm doing stuff, I see what they're doing with their cursor. It's almost like a Miro board inside of a program, right? Keep in mind, you can also get teams. You can get thousands of people working on a single model. It's also really hilarious when somebody accidentally messes up that little model because it flags and it tells everybody who it is who messed it up and where they messed it up. So it's definitely one of those programs that has really tried to minimize every single aspect of the architectural process. So going from design literally to construction documents and construction management, if you're familiar with the phases of architecture and construction. So just to kind of boil it out, at the top, of course, you have something somewhat familiar. It's kind of like your drop-down window for file. You'll notice it has save as, PDF a file. You can activate controls. I usually don't actually use these buttons too much. You can measure between 2 references, align dimensions. And to be fair, what's really nice about this program is if you just hover over it, it's going to tell you what it is and sometimes even give you an animation about what it does. So the program pretty much understands it's a hard program, right? So it really is trying to make it a little bit easier for you. But these are really more like quick, very often used buttons. The next tab, of course, is File. Excuse me. And you have some similar things. You can open up recent documents, new, open, stuff that you really shouldn't have to worry about because I made this file for you, again, to make it a little bit easier. And it is what architectural firm or engineering firm would do for you as well, though they would have a base template because they don't want their workers wasting time every 30 minutes every day. I mean, that adds up, right? So, of course, they would even give you a template in a real world scenario. First things first, you may notice there's actually a couple of tabs, almost like an internet browser at the top. We have architecture, and it's filled with a lot of familiar things, such as walls, doors, windows, components, columns, roofs, ceilings, floors. To be fair, we probably won't get into those too much. I might dive into the mullion system. We have railing, ramps, stairs. Man, this is one heck of a button right here. You can make stairs, no longer, I mean, some of you guys are going to be like, why didn't we do this observation project in Revit, right? And it's because you have to learn it manually. You learn so much from doing that you're going to be better off, trust me, in any other program because of it. We probably won't get into model text. We'll use some model lines for sure. We'll use rooms and room separators, areas, and as you can imagine, a lot of this stuff, if you kind of just hover around it and really just read the description, it tells you what it is and what it does, right? So it is going to take some time to learn this program. However, we do have 3 weeks, and it's a very small project, and it should be something quite familiar to you. It's a home, right? So I don't know about you, but I constantly do this every day. I constantly think of, man, if I had an apartment, this is how it would be. oh man, if I could have more space in my house, this is what I'd add. So that's just kind of the way I'm wired, if you will. The next tab, of course, we have structure, and you can imagine this is actually more of a structural engineer stuff, but it does pertain to things that we do, such as beams. We'll definitely be using a beam system today to show you how that works. To be fair, I probably won't get into isolated walls or slabs or, again, it's a construction document program, so you can imagine you're going to find those things. On the steel, we won't use this tab at all. This is definitely much more for a structural engineer, but what's really nice is you can make structures and you can even calculate them based on real world scenarios. Of course, we have precast systems I definitely use a lot, such as duct systems, mechanical equipment, and you start to realize that everything has been categorized. For instance, I can't make a window in the wall category. I can't make a wall in the roof category, right? So a lot of things are completely categorized, and you'll soon kind of realize that Revit is actually more of a catalog-based system. And of course, we see that in our tab view at the top. We'll use insert a lot. Annotate is probably one of my favorite things of all time. I wish Illustrator would get on board and I could just click text and just text something. So I could be like, site. That's really awesome. Now what would be really cool is if I just click on it and I can add some arrows. How cool is that? And I can even give them, little marker lines and everything. So I really wish, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things I like about Revit for construction documents. Now, to be fair, in most architectural programs, especially Texas Tech, U of H, Rice, they don't use Revit in their studios. And for good reason. You're not making construction documents in your studio. Very often you're actually making designs, concepts, renderings, things to really engage a clientele or a board of trustees to communicate your ideas. To be fair, Revit is an architectural communicator for building, right? So as you can imagine, a lot of the tools are set for builders, right? And of course, construction documents. Now, for the most part, I know we haven't gone through all of this. Like I said, there's a lot of it that we're not going to use. Like analyze, forget it. You're not going to use that till master's program anyway. But it is pretty cool that you can analyze your very model inside of a program. Don't get me wrong, it gets really cool really fast, but we just don't have the time, nor do we really need that right now, if that makes sense. Massing and site, as you can see, this is something that I've already done for our model. And I think actually, I can't remember if I did this in a template, so I'll actually probably start there for today. So in my case, I'm gonna get rid of mine and more or less actually start with what I gave you. So what I ended up giving you was a DWG import of, honestly, a site that I made up real quick on Rhino. So yeah, I can export lines into Revit very easily. I can export objects into Revit as well, but again, that's much more advanced. So for today, the way that I like to teach Revit is definitely from the foundation. So going from the topography and really building up. And to be fair, that's the way Revit wants your projects too. Like I said, I don't know about you guys, but how many of you just jump into a program and know exactly what you want to do? Usually that's not the case, especially in studio, right? And to be fair, changing something in Revit is arguably a lot harder than changing something in Rhinoceros. So again, we have our tools and how we use them, right? When it's really creative and we don't want to be bound by the program, Rhinoceros is a great tool. However, if I'm trying to make construction drawings, maybe for my final project is probably the only time that I want final drawings, Revit might be a good avenue for that. Again, I could export it to Illustrator and change the line weights anyway, right? So again, don't get me wrong, it's still a digital program and we can still use those things. However, let's start with the topography for today. In my case, I'll go to my massing and site, and you'll see that there's a couple of options. In my case, it's a Topo Solid. Actually, they changed the name on that one. That's kind of funny. But in our case, we'll create it from an import because, well, that's what I gave you guys, an import. So in my case, I'll click on that. And basically it's going, well, what import are you talking about? So in my case, I can either click on the object or create from CAD. So in my case, I'm going to create from CAD. And you'll notice that a blue box immediately appears around the bounding area of that DWG. I'll go ahead and click on it. And in fact, it's going to go, hey, actually you have some layers inside of that DWG. Which ones would you like to turn into topography? Well, obviously I want the topography lines, right? Not the trees. That's going to get strange really fast because it's going to take that and assume that it's a topography line. Definitely not what I want. So I'll unclick trees, setback, and the layer 0, which is a default layer in AutoCAD or, as you guys know, in Rhinoceros. I'll press OK, and immediately it creates a surface. Again, very common to, like, say, loft in Rhinoceros. However, as you can see, a little bit different. So that's already created, and you'll see that I can modify sub-elements, I can edit the sketch, I can add points, I can split stuff, and this is kind of all part of this modify and topo soil, right? As soon as I exit, right, it goes away. As soon as I click on it, it comes back, right? So keep in mind that some tools are activated actually when you click on the particular categorized object, right? If I click on a wall, I'm not going to get the same tools that I would get for topography. Hopefully that makes sense. So when in doubt, especially in Revit, click on something and kind of see what options you get. In my case, I could edit the sketch, and as you can see from the top view, and sorry, again, I kind of have to slow down and talk about every little thing. This guy's one of your best friends. So instead of, constantly going like this or, having 4 separate views like we do in Rhinoceros, you can simply click on this. And in fact, it'll line it up for you. It'll even center it to the page. If I click on east, it'll flip it to the east. If I click on front elevation, you'll see that it actually moves the model at the exact same time. However, in my case, that import command didn't exactly get everything perfect. So I'm going to fake it till I make it, actually delete a line. And in my case, I'm basically in an edit mode of the boundary, right? So in my case, this purple line is actually indicating the extents of that topography surface. So in my case, I kind of just want to fix it up or, delete what's not good. Now in my case, you'll notice that you'll always have to have a closed purple line. Again, I know there's a reason I'm going fast, and it's so that I can get more stuff and information on this video. But please feel free to pause it and dive into this stuff, right? Because to be fair, you'll learn a lot more just trying to do things in Revit. But for a while, you'll definitely feel like the program's in control and not so much you. Couple of things. I can go and make a boundary, right? I can just draw a line, right? And what's funny is it's gonna stick to that. So if I press OK, it's gonna go, hey, well, some of the slab shapes are actually outside of your boundary. That's okay, not a big deal. But it'll definitely let you do that, right? And just notice that it's controlling the extents of that final object. In my case, I don't actually want that, right? It was really just for example. I can do a couple things. For instance, one of my favorite tools is a pick line tool. So if I click that and I pick a line, it's going to actually pick the correct line for me, or at least the one that is, of course, in my case, the extent of my topography. So I'll press check, and in my case, it's going, hey, hold up, buddy. Lines must be closed loops in order for it to make a shape. That makes sense because you guys learned in Rhinoceros the difference between an open and a closed shape can make all the difference, right? And Revit won't even let you make an open shape. That's how constricting this program can be. So in my case, I do need to connect those first. Now trim is at least the easier one. I can type in TR and it puts it together. Now again, kind of like trim, kind of like extend. To be fair, it's both. So for instance, what if this line is too large? I can do TR again. And again, it's going to click on, the ones that I click on are the ones that it's going to keep. Watch that again. So I'm going to undo. Oh. TR is the command. I literally, there's no enter button, there's no escape. It's literally just TR. The way that commands work in Revit is basically a 2-key system. So very often you'll hit 2 letters. It's very weird, trust me. But you kind of get used to it. So in my case, TR will keep the lines that I click on. So if I click on this side and this side, oh, it's gonna keep that one and actually trim that one off. In my case, that's not what I actually want. So in my case, TR, I want to keep this side and this side. trims it right off. So again, let me tell you, it took me a while to get that. I was just clicking around. I'm like, why is it always getting rid of the other one? Anyway, it was also because they kind of just throw you at this, especially at tech. I was smart enough to go ahead and take that optional Revit course. It was optional, right? And let me tell you, it's a long, boring course, but it definitely taught me a lot about Revit, and I'm glad because, well, now I can use that information to teach you. So in my case, nothing's actually done yet. To be fair, I could even get kind of fancy with the spices. If I want a hole in the middle of my topography, I can, right? I mean, I don't, but I could. And to be fair, obviously that was way easier than trying to do that in Rhinoceros. So don't get me wrong, there's some positives and negatives of both of these programs. But in my case, definitely not what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that and press OK. So far, so good. However, if I wanted to dial in some things, I realized that, oh man, my topography is kind of off at the top, and it's kind of looking polygonal to me. That's probably not right. Again, I'm going to go to, instead of edit sketch, I'm going to go to modify subsurface elements, right? Or in my case, modify sub, I guess they shorten that. So I'm going to modify it, and to be fair, these are really hard to see and probably hard to see on the projector as well. Hopefully in the recording you can actually see that a little bit better. But you'll notice this entire surface is actually made up of points, right? You guys kind of see that? They're kind of hard to see. But essentially is a mesh surface. It's not a NURB surface, as you guys are really familiar with maybe in Rhinoceros. So we can take each of these points and, well, to be fair, I can do it two ways. I can select the point, as you guys know. I can use these blue arrows, if you will, and they are a little tricky to click on. Be careful. I can manually move them, right? And of course it's going to move as necessary. And to be fair, for this project, not too bad, right? Because I only have a certain number of points. Obviously, if I have millions of points, this is not the option you want to take, right? In my case, if I had millions of points, I would actually take a few and make them congruent, right? So in my case, I can control the elevation right here, and I can simply say, well, I want them to be 12 feet in the sky. As soon as I hit enter, well, it's going to take all of those points and of course make them 12 feet in the sky. Hopefully that's making sense. It's a point-derived surface, right? But once things are good, that looks great. Basically, I just need to click on modify again and click on the outside of the page, and things are pretty much locked in until I click on it again and of course change those things. Now I can add points, add split lines. I'm not necessarily going to cover that today, but you're more than welcome to explore these things. In my case, I've got the foundation. We're good. Now this is why, of course, you want to make a sketch first, right? And then use your sketch to actually implicate in Revit. I can't express that enough. Unless you're just a really good designer and you're a professor already, I don't recommend just starting your design in Revit. However, for today, and the sake of tutorial purposes, I'm just going to go for it. Usually, it kind of has some mishaps. Obviously, I have some faux pas in my design because I didn't sketch it out first. So, anyway, let's check it out. So, I think it's actually also still in massing in sight. We can basically make a floor. Well, actually, I think they moved it. I'm going to have to look at where they moved it. But we can basically make a building pad. Not super important for today, but we'll get there maybe by part 2 on next Tuesday. So first things first, I need a floor. So I'm going to go to my architecture tab and click on floor. You'll notice that there's a couple of options here. Like for instance, I could do a floor by face. This is what I would actually use if I brought in a Rhinoceros model. I'd have to tell the program what I want to be a floor. Remember that Revit is a category-based program. In fact, to prove it to you, if you scroll down on some of these project browsers, you'll notice there's this little button called families and groups here. If I click on those families, it has every single component known to man in this project. So for instance, all my analytical links, all my annotation symbols, all my furniture, all my floors, all my flex pipes, everything, right? So if you ever lose something, of course you can find it within the family tab. Maybe a good segue into some of these pieces first before we start to make our floor. So you'll notice actually by default there is a properties window and a project browser window. That's usually where I like to keep them. Some people prefer that, project browser is over here, and really that's kind of up to you. Some default programs, they'll actually start like this, where your project browser is over here and your properties is over here. I kind of like that too because, well, it extends the whole thing. And to be fair, as soon as you click on something, it changes your property. So you might want to actually be able to view those pretty well, right? I'll keep it like that for right now just because I don't really need the screen real estate. However, to be fair, if I did want to see both views at the exact same time, I could hit WT. Again, I have no idea who made these, but if I hit WT, of course, I can get both of those as well. And I could double click my center button to actually zoom extend, right? I mean, that is kind of nice. I'm not gonna lie. Just double click the middle button and of course goes right into view. And you can use them basically as tabs. So, I mean, you could still go with kind of a Revit viewport model if that is what's nice for you and you're used to it. By all means, go for it. But it is basically just a tab. So, of course, we have our properties, which is, again, I'm just gonna have to go over every time we click on something because they do change. However, the one that doesn't change is, of course, our project browser, not Bowser. And of course has a lot of stuff in it, right? Families, again, it's a catalog program, so it's got a lot in there. But the given of what I have for you is your sheets. So again, it's a construction document. So if I double click on floor plan, yes, I've already given you a title block. However, to be fair, you could change it too by double clicking on your title block, realizing that it's gonna open up the category, right? And it's basically something that I can put on every single sheet. Now, I'm not going to particularly get into this because honestly, it's very boring. Like I said, I spent 16 weeks on making this stuff, and let me tell you, some of those weeks I was like, oh my God, I don't want to talk about title blocks anymore. So I went ahead and made one for you. Of course, we'll actually load those in, but in our case, it's already loaded. So again, just kind of showing you for reference. Now, the way that this works is, well, I have views and I have sheets. So I can literally drag my floor plan view into my project or my sheet. Once I click on it, boom, it actually gives that view into a sheet, right? This is actually more akin to Autodesk AutoCAD, right? So if you have viewports and the model space, very familiar, but just called something different. Very much this is kind of the layout viewport, right? Whereas this is technically the model space. Again, if that doesn't make sense to you, it's because you haven't opened up CAD. Anyway, kind of similar, not exactly the same. But what's nice is I can still double click on my model space and further refine it. You'll notice that, like InDesign, it has a viewport within the view itself, right? And I could double click on the outside of it so that I can move my actual pieces. Floor plan, oh wow, it's even got the scale for me. So, oh wait, it says on the paper I'm supposed to be at 1/4 scale. So if I double click and I go to view scale, oh voila, I have every scale known to man, and some. I could even put a custom one. So I don't know about you, but that's a really nice feature that I really wish Rhinoceros had. Technically it does and you can set it up, but it's not as easy and as intuitive as maybe Revit is. But instantly, wow, that's what 1/4 scale looks like, and immediately shows you that difference. Again, I'm gonna switch that back to maybe something, I do need a site plan, and I do want most of my site plan to fit, so I'm gonna go with maybe 110, 210. And what's nice is it even has it in order, so that yes, you can know that 1/16 is technically bigger than 1/20. But let's try 1/20 or 1/16. That's probably too small. And again, you kind of get the idea. We can basically go through these until we, of course, find the right one for our sheet. Now you'll notice that, well, by default, this is an ArcD sheet, so it's 24 by 36 in its dimensions. However, let's click on some of the other pages. We can actually open all of them. You'll see that there's a roof plan, some elevations, sections, perspectives, and really the only thing that changes is, well, again, the construction document, and if you're in Tech 1 or Tech 2, you definitely know what I'm talking about, right? We have different sheet numbers for different pages. What does the A stand for? Anybody? Architecture, of course, right? And so civil engineer, you'll see CE, or structural engineering, you'll see S sometimes. Again, to label and notify the builder, right, of which drawing to look at or focus on, right, depending on which, gosh, what's the word? I use too many words in this. Revit focuses me to use all my vocabulary, but I think you get the point. So I'm going to close those because technically the more that I have of these open, the slower the program will be. Just like Rhinoceros, the more viewports you have, the slower it's going to go. To be fair, I like to just build the model first, and you'll see why. So after I've explained a little bit of the project browser and the properties, we can finally start making some architecture. So in my case, I just want to click on floor and make a floor real quick. Now, I know that sounds kind of intuitive, but, well, it's not. It could be technically made anywhere. Revit doesn't know if the floor means here or there or here or there. So I might actually have to set my reference first. So you'll see this button that says Set Work Plane, right? Now, to be fair, in Rhinoceros, that's the C plane that some of you guys accidentally move sometimes, and it shows our X, Y, and Z. In Revit, we can control where that work plane is. As you can see from the little animation that is trying to show you, it shows an animation of, well, at the ground floor, but I can also set the work plane to anything, right? Including, say, the slope of a roof. So in my case, I want to click on that first and maybe pick a plane or find a level that I've already made. In my case, it's making me realize I should probably explain the levels as well. So in order to do that, we need to make something first. So in my case, I don't want to build this on the roof. I want to build it on the first floor. I've actually already set some of these up for you again to make things a little bit easier, and I kind of just forgot that I set up that too for you. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK. But if it wasn't set for me, I could also just pick a plane, press OK, and actually establish that plane. You'll notice, remember, these are a bunch of triangles. Even though it looks flat, it's a bunch of triangles, right? So be very careful. That triangle might be not exactly flat, right? Suddenly you got a Leaning Tower of Pisa and you didn't mean to. Unfortunately, in Revit, you would have to start over. You can't just change planes, right? So there's a reason I set it up for you a little bit, right? So in setting that plane, again, I just want to make sure that I have first floor. That way, when I start drawing, say, my architecture floor, it's actually going to make it on that plane. In fact, if I hit show, it's going to show me where that plane exists, which is good. That's about right. And I couldn't remember if I chose this one or that one. Definitely chose that one for you, right? So great. Let's make a floor. In my case, I tried to press the check mark and it's like, hey, the sketch is empty, bro. Yeah, of course, I can't do anything there yet. So let's draw something. Let's get fancy with the spices a little bit, right? In my case, I'm going to start with my boundary line. And you'll notice that it even calls out the dimensions, the angles, based on the reference of the plane. To be fair, that plane is a little oblong. It's not exactly orthogonal. So I'm just going to disregard the angles that it brings up. And honestly, if I hold shift, it's going to do kind of the same thing that any other program does. To be fair, I can always change this and double click and change the sketch, right? So in my case, give or take about 1,000 feet. So I'm just going to kind of draw a quick little sketch, give or take. Get fancy with the spices. Maybe that's kind of a neat room over there. And maybe my studio space is a really long space over there. Maybe my front door, about right there, give or take. Right, not too shabby. Now, what is nice is I can hit DI for dimension. Again, some of them actually make sense. Some of them make no sense. But when I hit DI, I can actually immediately make a dimension. What's nice about dimensions in Revit is if I click on the line, if I click on the line without, my modify tool, you'll see that some things are activated in blue. When things activate in blue, that's a good sign that things can be modified in Revit. So you'll see that, whoa, my dimension turned blue. Why did it do that? Well, it's basically going, hey, Now you can edit this and type in 20 feet, and it's automatically going to do that. Again, some tools I wish were also in Rhino that are not. To be fair, this is what I like to do because I just drew a random sketch. So I might want to kind of analyze my drawing for a second. Make sure that I get sort of well-defined boundaries, like 10 feet versus 10 feet 6 inches and a half, right? I want to square things or round things to their appropriate distance. For instance, yeah, 45 is not bad. You'll notice when I click on these things, it'll actually give you the true dimension if you click on it. The true dimension is 45 feet. Again, if I want it 45 feet and 6 inches, enter, and it's going to make it 45 feet and 6 inches. 12 feet, man, I actually sketched this pretty good. I'll switch that to like 6 feet, kind of round things about, if you will. 5 feet, that's pretty good. And you'll notice even when I click on something, it even brings up other dimensions, kind of randomly, to be honest. Like, sometimes I wanted to actually reference to that. And again, you can change it, right? And you can also just drag and drop it, right? Not too bad. So we got a floor, and it's floating in the middle of nowhere. Why is that? Well, let's find out. I can't just type in what though, right? I have to click on the object, and we get, again, a change properties bar. One of the first tools you'll see is that, well, in my case, I loaded a bunch for you. Again, you'd have to make all these by hand, or again, rely on your firm and the components that they want you to use. In my case, you guys are part of my firm and have a bunch of preloaded documents. Now, in my case, I only put 3, and to be fair, you can make more, right? I mean, you can duplicate and of course make another one if you must. But in my case, I'm just going to use a regular generic 18 inches, and it's even going to change the object. You'll notice, unlike a command in Rhino, I can't just extrude stuff. I really have to change the properties of each and every single item. I know it can get kind of tedious, but it's just the way this catalog works. So if I click on that, you'll notice also height offset from level. Remember where level was? Our work plane was on the ground. Well, that explains why it's 3 feet in the air. So if I change that to 0, enter, it's going to go, hey, highlighted topo surface is going to overlap the floor. That's okay. Basically, it's just trying to express to me that, hey, it's going to be a little bit underneath, right? And that's okay because we can make actually a building pad to save ourselves from that. Now, if I knew where building pad was, because I think it has changed locations, it used to be in the massing site. How could I fake this till I make it? Oh, I know what to do. We'll just actually change our topography surface as if it was actually a real project. In fact, I could modify the surface elements, right, and actually add some points. In my case, the ones that I want to add are to a better level of where I'm at. So I might actually want to click on something and go, oh, there's 0 level. I could even move it down a little bit, right? Again, after all, it is all triangles. So if I move these down a little bit, of course it's going to start to reveal that surface. This is definitely not a bad manual way, right? As you can see, we start to get into some drainage issues. Definitely not y'all's problem yet, but you definitely want to dial this in to where the water drains away from, of course, your building. That's something you'll learn later though. But for the most part, I just want to make sure that, I have give or take a couple of inches, to make it a little bit more realistic. And I could even bring it up or have a cantilever. I kind of like the cantilever look. I'm going to keep it. In fact, you know what? I'm going to make it even worse. If they were all at least the same point, that's already at -5, so I'm going to go with -6 feet. And by worse, I mean better, right? Anyway, remember there's no exit button for this, so you either have to click on the outside or go back to your Modify tab and kind of see what happened. For the most part, that's looking pretty good, but kind of hard to look at, right? So I may actually want to double click on my floor plan and work on it there, right? As you can see, I got a lot of information in here, right? I've even got some previous walls from last time. My bad. Those aren't there. And in my case, well, on the first floor plan, at least in the project, what it's asking for is that my site plan has my first floor plan in it, right? So I might want to dial it to that. However, we can still rotate this. So if I take this piece and again, RO for rotate, that one's kind of simple. I can rotate these things. Oddly enough, if I rotate the bounding box, I have to rotate it the opposite way. To be fair, I honestly have no idea why. But I wanted to rotate it this way, so I rotated it actually the other way. Again, play around with that. It's the viewport that I'm actually rotating. I'm not actually rotating the model, just the way that it's of course projected. So in my case, I just want to dial it in a little bit so that I can, get a good idea of the site and the relationship to at least the first floor plan. You'll notice it's slightly off. You guys see that? I definitely don't want that because, well, you guys know us. We do things in an orthogonal fashion. So the first thing I want to fix before I get too ahead of myself is the direction. So I might use DL. I know, another weird one. I hope you guys are writing these down, even though there is a large chart somewhere that I'll post on Miro as well. But I'll use DL so that I can draw a line and get a reference, right? So in my case, Revit definitely likes to make perfect orthogonal lines. So it even locks in by itself 90 degrees and 45 and 0. So in my case, I definitely want to align it to that a little bit better. I'm going to use AL for a line. So AL, again, it's very weird. I'm going to click on where I want it to align first, so my reference line, and then I'm going to tell it what I want to reference. So in my case, this piece, right? And you'll notice the entire floor locked in and aligned to that very line. And now I no longer really need that line, and it's asking me also to save my project, which is probably a good idea. I'm going to go ahead and save my project. I think it's on my desktop, so it's going to take a second. Not too shabby. Honestly, saving in this program can be honestly kind of detrimental. It freezes, and sometimes even before you do something big in Revit, it'll actually ask you, do you want to save before you do this, because you're about to explode your computer, right? So it is kind of nice and helpful in that regard, but I can't tell you how many times I've had crashes in Revit because, well, I was working on a school, and it's a large freaking model, and 1,000 other people were working at the same time. You run into bugs, right? Thank goodness you're getting paid though anyway. It ends up not really being your problem, besides actually telling the manager, hey, there's a huge bug problem in the Revit file. Anyway, story for another day. But we've got our floor. Let's keep going. Let's make some walls. So I'm going to click on wall. And in my case, I can just kind of click, and you'll notice I can hit spacebar to make it on the outside or make it on the inside. You'll notice that I have a couple of options when I click on wall. For instance, right here. First things first, I can control the height, right? So I can either make it connected or unconnected. So by default, it is unconnected and usually about 20 feet in the sky. In my case, well, I want to be specific. Maybe I want 10-foot ceilings, maybe I want 12-foot ceilings. Again, this is definitely a program where the design is finished. Like I said, I'm kind of just going with it to teach the program, but you relatively want to refer back to your sketch and go, oh yeah, I made 12-foot ceilings on the first floor and I made 10-foot ceilings on the second. Sweet, I'm going to continue that, right? However, I might need some more views, as you can see. So let's make a couple of views first. Let's go to view, and you'll see that we have an elevation button. I'm going to click on elevation, and yes, I made some of these for you as well. It is called an interior elevation. It works the same. It's just so actually the architect, because I set up Revit files for other architects so that they can teach their workers and things like that. And for a while I was making some really good money just teaching Revit, but I was also dying slowly inside. So let's get some elevations. You'll see that it starts to try to kind of rotate them for you, if you can kind of see that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Again, it's trying to basically find it. And you'll see actually some of my arrows are in the wrong direction. If I click on that main piece, of course I can enact it and deactivate others. It's going, hey, that's a view, do you want to delete it? And then in my case, yes, right? Because it's the wrong view. Do you want to delete it? Heck yeah. You'll notice if I click on the black piece though, it actually sets up the line of what I'm looking at, right? For instance, This is also how far I can see. So in my case, I want to see pretty far for that elevation. But if I double click on it, it's actually going to open up that view and reveal some of the things that I've already done for you, right? Luckily, I didn't have to make 2D. I didn't have to do any of that command. I just double clicked on the view and that view is already there for me. Technically, it's already made 2D, right? Is essentially what we're looking at. So in my case, I've already made some floors for you. First floor, second floor, third, fourth, and roof, right? To be fair, you can delete these or use as necessary. But what I'm trying to refer to is that it's a parametric program. We want to set these things up from the beginning. To be fair, it is a 3-week project. You can kind of fake it till you make it, right? But I do want to teach the program correctly. So, architecture, wall, and I'm going to set my height to second floor. Simple enough. And you'll see that it automatically makes it as a daisy chain. You can set radiuses, and again, play around with these things. Now in my case, I think it's going to be a lot easier to just pick these lines. So I'm just going to pick, and suddenly I have all my walls and I'm done. Again, there's something nice about Revit, I'm not going to lie to you. Right? To be fair, that would take a little bit longer in Rhinoceros. However, changing it is a different story, right? But that's looking fair. You know, it's going up to level 2. You know, what if I decide that level 2 is a little bit taller? Oh, actually, you know, I think I want 12 feet, you know, so I'm going to type in 12 feet. And it's going to automatically change all of those walls because of the parametric nature of them being connected. Hey, guys. Glad you're talking about the project, but just don't want it to pick up in the recording. But yeah, it is definitely parametric. As soon as I move this, right, it definitely controls the walls, and quite literally we can change it on a dime. Right, you'll notice also even my dimensions work here as well. I can do multiple dimensions on something, and as soon as I click on that object, again, I have more editable items so that I can directly dial in some of the features and parts. So we've got our walls, and you may have noticed it's kind of thick lined, it's kind of cartoony and bubbly. If you don't like that and you'd rather it look like CAD, you can type in TL, and it makes it a thin line. That stands for thin line. Again, I'm not sure who made these commands, but TL is definitely my best friend because I'd rather look at it with a thin line and a little bit more CAD / Illustrator like, right? Again, you can kind of see what that difference looks like. That's probably what I'd show my client. That's what I'd show my studio professor. So where was I? Oh yeah, let's make some walls. Let's make some spaces, right? I'm gonna type in WA for wall. So I use a lot of the commands, right? I think I kind of decided this was gonna be maybe my kitchen space. Maybe I get, I don't know, fancy with the spices. Maybe I have a nice big bathroom. I do need a stair, so I'm thinking my stair is going to be right here. I'm just going to kind of draw that real quick, just to kind of reference it for myself. DL is what I did right there, so I could draw a line real quick. But keep in mind, there's nothing actually there. It's just, actually it's only on this floor plan page, by the way. DL I like to use because it's called a detail line. Right, I can just add details, and I can even decide whether they're printed or not. So very often I sketch while I use Revit. Not a lot of people do though. It's just kind of a thing that I like to do. But again, I'm kind of just planning some things out. Maybe I'm gonna have my, I don't know. Again, I probably should have sketched this out a little bit because now I'm just kind of designing on the fly. I'm gonna go with kitchen space here, and probably actually just close that real quick. That way I can always open it or, you know, do whatever. And you'll see that it kind of magically puts stuff together for you, right? I mean, arguably in questionable ways, but as soon as I move things, it's pretty locked in. It's trying to help you. It's trying to make the architecture for you. But to be fair, it doesn't know much, and there's no AI on it, and even if it did, it still doesn't really know what component is which. Again, I can still dial in things though with my arrows, and you'll see just what it actually does with the walls, right? To be fair, yeah, I mean, it is pretty interesting and creative. I can still align things, AL, Like say, for instance, I want to align to something very particular, like say that piece to that piece. You can, but yeah, as you can see, you'll run into some problems because, well, it's trying to keep those together, right? So don't get me wrong, you can do that, but as you can see, not this way. So when I would say in Rhinoceros you can solve things 15 different ways, in Revit it's more like one way, right? You can fake it 14 ways, but the way Revit wants it, there's only one true way. But give or take, I got my studio space. Let's talk about stairs, some windows, some doors, DR for doors. And yes, I've loaded some for you. Just a couple, right? I put a glass door in there for you, pocket door. So don't get me wrong, you can find these on bimobject.com. That's a really good resource. I'll probably dive into that a little bit more next time. Just because, well, I do technically already have some loaded for you, and let's face it, some of you guys, as soon as I show you that there's a catalog, you spend hours picking the right window rather than spending hours working on the model. Suddenly you got this great architecture that has great windows, but the design stinks, right? So don't focus so much on the wonderful catalog, but I'm right there with you. I could spend hours looking at all the different things that are made. But we don't have to do that, and in fact, most firms will even load these in for you as well. So DR is for door, WN is for window. So as soon as I hit those two letters, it immediately switches to the different category. So in my case, I'm going to start with a door, and as you can see, I can kind of hover around. I can press spacebar if I want to basically flip it. I could switch to a 36 by 96, and that's looking a lot better for my front door. And I think I'll have a back door. You know what? I want a double door, right? I think I put double doors in here. I can put a garage door. I don't know why I put garage door for you, but I guess I didn't put a double door. My bad. It's all right. We can just put two. And in my case, I'm going to hit space and flip them around. You'll notice it's not exactly right, but that's okay. I can use AL and basically align things. I can also take things and move them, right? And it's not going to change a dang thing. In fact, I could really dial stuff in. I can even use my dimension lines. And to be fair, I can even equalize them, right? And make sure that it was absolutely center onto the door. I would play around a little bit with the dimension lines. It's a very key tool and very useful and helpful when making these drawings. So maybe this is my back door situation. I'm probably gonna have a bunch of storage here. So I'm gonna kind of just draw this in, just to kind of remind myself for next time as well. So maybe I have a countertop over here. Maybe, I don't know, I like the extra fridge. Going upstairs, my studio space, it's got to be next to my kitchen and my bathroom because those are my, my break spaces for when I'm working. I like to have some food and be able to just kind of run to the restroom. I don't know about, is it just me or is it like when you're really intensely working about something, you kind of like, you put it off. You're like, no, I'm going to lose my rhythm. I'm going to lose my focus if I go to the restroom right now. So I don't know. I like to have it kind of close by. Front door to the kitchen, probably not ideal. So I don't know, what if I want to change that? I can click on the door itself. I can pick a new host. The door is actually hosted to another category. I can't just make a door out in the middle of nowhere. In fact, it'll say, hey, you need a wall or something to attach it to. So if I pick a new host, it'll disappear for a second and it'll basically go back into that same sort of view type before it's actually made. So maybe I actually open it that way. And again, maybe I actually dial these things a little bit better. But there's my studio space. And again, I just want to make sure I cover a lot in this first video. That way you can get started, right? That way you're not just like, well, he hasn't gotten the stairs yet. Do I dive into it? Do I not? Right? Things like that. But we can go back to our model and see what's happening, right? Not too shabby. Again, what's kind of nice is I'm just clicking, adding categories, and it's building a model for me. And to be fair, at first it does feel like magic. By the end, you're like, why did I decide to be in architecture? But yeah, so far so good. It's even got the shade and shadow. A lot of things are taken care of for us. Again, it's trying to help out architects. So in my case, let's continue to some windows. I'm going to type in WN. I did add a couple of windows, and again, if you want a different size, let's at least show you how to do that because it's the same in doors and windows, so I'll at least cover one of them. So let's say I wanted actually a really big window, right? I want to go, you know, I want one of these guys. I want 10 feet by 3. That'd be pretty sweet. Instead of the metal at the bottom, we'll just go full window. So I'm going to go to Edit Type. I'm going to go to Duplicate. I'm going to give it a name, and please don't just do 36 by 48 number 2 because you're going to get confused really, really fast. So in my case, I'm going to do 36 by 120 because that would be a 10-foot tall window. Now, it won't change everything. You'll see that actually I have a multiple variables, right? I mean, gosh, we can get down into literally the code name, the type mark, the cost. This is really cool. Yeah, if you have the cost of all your components, you can click a button by the end of your project and see the budget of your entire thing that you just made. And as you delete windows or doors, you'll see the total cost change too. Now again, probably not great for studio, but really fantastic for my construction-minded friends out there, right? To where, oh, there's even a change of price of the material. I can go into the door, change the price, and get a new value for the cost or the budget of my design. Again, very useful. But as you can see, very complicated. There's a lot of parts to every single little category, including its dimensions. So in our case, I need to change that to 10 and the width to 3. You'll also see some extra stuff like the rough width, the rough height, and things that you'll learn actually in construction class. For instance, you guys may very well know a 2x4 is not actually a 2x4, right? Of course, that's its nominal dimension and not its actual dimension. Anyway, so as soon as we change that, we press apply or OK, nothing happens. Well, that's because I haven't placed it yet. So I'll type in WN again, and of course, this is our window tool. And it's immediately going, hey, you want it here, you want it here, you want it there? So I'm just gonna kind of pick a few places. After all, I can always dial these in. So I don't know, my studio front, yeah, it's gotta have a bunch of windows, but I also don't want my neighbors to the left to see me, so I don't know, maybe I just put one there. Probably want a window, but not a gigantic one in my little storage space, so I'll put one about right there. Definitely gotta have some in the kitchen, but I do have a countertop, so maybe stick back to that 36 by 48. You know, 2 above the kitchen, and maybe 1 next to the refrigerator over here. That'd be nice. Yeah, why not, right? And what's nice is we can dial those in, and as you can see, immediately puts them in a default position. In our case, 3 feet above the ground line. So what's kind of nice about this is, well, I can select this, but I don't want to select all of them, right? One at a time. I'd right click on one of them and select all instances visible in my view. Great. And now I have the properties of all of them, and I can set that to 0. Once I hit enter, it's going to magically change it. And let me tell you, that's a heck of a studio space so far. But pretty wacky on terms of those. Now, to be fair, I could align it here, but it is really dangerous, right? I can hit tab to actually flip through all the different reference points that I can get to, and you'll see they're still activated in blue. To be fair, that's really hard. I like to do it in floor plan because it's a little easier, and I can dial these in with my dimensions. I know I'm getting right up close. I'm going to give it about 12 more minutes. Bear with me on this recording. So again, I like to dial things in as I go and sort of sketch it first. Again, I think it's a little bit more forgiving that way. I can lock in one thing. Oh, actually I accidentally did 2 separate dimensions. That's not going to work because I want to align multiple. So in my case, I just want to get that center window first and get the other side. That way at least the window's on center. I hit equal, and of course it's going to make that one equal. Now I need to move the windows a little bit, or align tool, and just keep going. So not too bad there. Align tool there, and not too shabby there. You may notice actually my windows are going the wrong way, right? Of course the glass goes on the inside, so I may have to click on the window itself and press spacebar, and it's going to flip that for us. Again, I got to tell you, I wish CAD would do that as well. But now we can take a look at our model and bam, it's already updated because it was being updated in real time. Yeah, that's probably too many windows there. I'll go with 2. When in doubt, I go with a displacement of odd to even. Odd to even. It's kind of the secret to good symmetry of a window. But they say very often you never put double windows, but I beg to differ. Anyway. But yeah, see, even, odd, we got another odd. Technically by the rule we'd go to even, and then that would be odd. Anyway, just in case you were ever wondering, I've ever looked at a spec house and would have been like, how do these all look kind of balanced? Usually it's because of those kinds of rules. Anyway, let's continue and maybe end it off with the stair today. Just to kind of recap a little bit, we've gone over the topography, the floor, moving some of the topography, walls, and windows and doors so far. Obviously some of the tools with dimensions. So lastly for today, let's cover the stairs. It is simple, but at the same time probably the most different thing that you've done for stairs. So in my case, I'm going to click on the architecture tab. I'm going to go to stair, which is odd to me why it just says stair, not plural, but anyway. And we basically draw it by hand in a weird way, but based on, again, another category. So I've loaded some for you called West stairs, monolithic stair, and precast stair. Really, I'm assuming that these are basically concrete stairs, so I'm going to go with somewhat monolithic. However, if you go to edit type, this is actually where the calculations are a bit fixed, right? What's nice is we can actually go to the real dimensioning of a construction project, which, as you guys know, if you've ever built stairs, it's not exactly 6 by 12 rise and tread. In fact, it can get quite complicated because of the different varying levels of your architecture. But in my case, I've already set this up for you so that you don't have to do it. So in my case, click one of the categories, and I'm just going to start clicking away, right? In fact, I can do a couple of different things. I can do a straight stair, full step spiral, center in spiral, L-shaped winder, and a U-shaped winder. To be fair, you can create a sketch, but I don't recommend it. You're more than welcome to try, but it can be very fickle. Anyway, you really have to know your line types. But at least for us, the only thing we need to decide is our base level, first floor, at 0, and our top level, second floor, at 0. So in my case, I'm going to start off in the center. Good thing I made that little sketch, right? And basically, it will actually only go up to the second floor. Do you guys see that? So it's actually calculating. You'll see actually in the right corner, it even says 6 risers created, 15 remaining. So let's say I just want to go up that way, but then I want it to turn and start going this way. Uh-oh. Well, I'm going to need to give it enough space to make that landing. But you guys can kind of see it's trying to make it while I do that. All right, so I'm going to hit exit. I'm going to move out a little bit more and try again. Ooh. So I'm going to go up that way. And again, please, you don't have to do crazy stairs, but I just want to kind of show off what the program is doing. So it's actually making 1 through 6 for us, landing, 6 through 13, landing, and 14 through 21, landing. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really, oh, dang, in 2024, it does show us before we make it. Nice. In 2023, it does not do that. Well, that's really nice because, well, now we can see a preview and go, well, that looks ridiculous. I'm going to hit my head constantly on this piece, so that's not going to work. So I'll go back to my floor plan. In my case, I'm just going to do Control-Z. Oh, and it's going to bring up, I don't have my keys set, so I got to use different keys on my Mac. But still, if I want to have a landing, I can definitely do that. But as you can see, it kind of stopped and it starts basically a new one, right? So I will have to line up to things or dial things in a little bit if I want a landing and continue. As you can see, it's better to kind of just do this all at once, at least in my case. It's what I'm used to, I'm sorry. So architecture, stair, and let's do that a little bit more. So I don't know, go up 6. I like to have a little bit of a landing and go up a couple of bit more steps. I mean, after all, I do have a lot of space to that window. And what's nice is once I'm done, I can select the whole thing and still move it, right, and dial it in or align it to the wall. I don't know about you, but you're supposed to put a little bit of space by code. I think it's actually 4 inches before you actually just go right to it, right? So again, we do a lot of things in code in Revit because usually we're already at the stage of construction drawing. I'll go ahead and press OK, and by golly, it even takes care of the line weights for me. It takes care of, you know, what's going to be hidden. It even does the break line for us and the up arrow. I know, again, some of you guys are like, I'm totally using this for studio, but please don't, because it is immediately going to limit you. Now, what I would recommend is designing something first in Rhinoceros and then searching how to go from Rhinoceros to Revit, because there are some pretty simple things that you can do in order to do this to your technically Rhinoceros model. Anyway, I'll just throw that in there. I probably won't get to it in this project, but it is an option if you're willing and want to take this to the next level in studio. Sorry. And I can still edit things, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. You can and can't, right? In some cases, that's pretty locked in. Oh, maybe. Yeah, così comme ça. I can use TR still, right, and keep things, right? Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Ah, there we go. So yeah, sometimes it works. But at least for today, I think that is where we will stop, right? You'll see it even created the rails for us, all kinds of stuff. And to be fair, I can even change those categories as well if I load some more, which we'll talk a little bit about next time. We'll go over into a little bit more of the systems. We'll put a roof on this guy, a second level, and really just continue as much as possible. But for today, I definitely think that's enough to get started, and especially over the weekend and the break. However, if you do have specific questions, I did want to show also that I've put some links. Hopefully you guys have actually been using these, but of course there is plenty for Revit as well. To be fair, I've probably covered, you know, bits and pieces of this, but to be fair, I am not the best live Revit tutorial guy in the world, right? Some of these guys, they do this for a living. They even sort of roundabout what they're clicking on. They'll even explain it a little bit. And yeah, sometimes the video is like 5 hours long. So clearly, you know, there's a lot to this program. Also, there's the shortcuts that I was talking about. If you go ahead and click on the source, this is where it gets really funny. If you just read some of these, you know, some of them, yeah, the hotkeys make sense. Yeah, like FR, find and replace. Sure, yeah, that makes sense. RT for tag room. Doesn't make any sense except room tag maybe. Texts, awesome. But as you can see, they're all basically double letter commands where the second letter actually enacts a command. But again, I just want you to make sure that you have the resources you need to continue. Yes, Ed?
No.
Oh, okay. Were there any questions? Again, I know I covered a whole lot in there, but do take your time with it and keep in mind that, well, really this weekend, it'd be a good idea to kind of sketch it out. 30 minutes. I'd probably set a timer for an hour and sketch out some ideas. Again, we're not going for the Picasso moment here, guys. I don't want your life's work, the best house you've ever made. We just need to get started, right? A lot of the times, my students try to do something really complex in Revit for the first time. I do not recommend that. If it's just a basic kindergarten house with a A-frame roof on top, we are good. You know, it's got 2 windows and a door. Awesome, right? Keep in mind, I just want to make sure that you guys are getting familiar with the program, not necessarily become amazing designers yet in Revit. So anyway, just throwing that out there. You're more than welcome to take it as far as you want to, but keep in mind it is a new program. Right now, if you're already familiar with Revit, please take it to the next level. Let's see, you know, take 2 of what you do in Revit. But otherwise, we'll end it there for today. If there's no other questions. Nothing? Pretty good? I know there's a lot of words in there, but thankfully it is recorded, so we'll end it there for today.